Well, good morning, everyone here in our room and in Zoom. We're very glad to have you here to join us for a presentation from one of our CUES fellows and her collaborators on individualized format readability, the messy research processes of educational technologies. I love that title. Thank you. I would like to start today by acknowledging our campus sits on the lands and territories of Indigenous people. Our state is home to 22 federally recognized tribes today, and Tucson, our town, is home to the O'odham and the Yaqui tribes. We are a campus committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we do this by striving to build sustainable relationships, bi-directional relationships, with Indigenous communities and Native nations through education offerings, community service, and partnerships. With that, I am, Guadalupe Lozano. I go by Guada, and I serve as director for CUES, the Center for University Education Scholarship. We're delighted to have you all here, and you see photos here of our panelists. Before I introduce them briefly and pass the baton to Shelley Rodrigo, I want to say thank you to our anonymous donor for CUES. CUES is an endowed center. It's been around since 2016, and this is part of our programming along distinguished fellowships, which you are due next Monday, I believe, nominations, and we have some other programming that we'll share with you at the end of the presentation today. So with that, we have Shelley Rodrigo, who is a CUES Distinguished Fellow and Senior Director for the Writing Program, various other titles connected to the presentation of today. And she'll introduce herself again and her panelists as well. But you see them here. We have Bethany Brooks Harrison, Anuj Gupta, and Rick Treitman, who is in Zoom.
Yes.
So hello, Rick. Thanks for being with us. We'll bring you in at the right time. And with that, I will pass it on to Shelley. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone online is hearing things. Yay. So let's see if slides are working for me. Yes, they are. I want to start off by saying the focus on this presentation is on the term messy. I did say messy. I chose messy intentionally. First, we're in the middle. This project, as with, there are presentations and publications that talk about finished research. This is not one of them. We're in the middle, and the middle is always messy. But this project, even larger, is messy in a variety of different ways. First, the topic. Just going to talk about the topic and how and why it's messy, as well as the angle of the topic, why that can be a little complicated and messy for folks. Talk about context, trying to do research in a pandemic and the methods, as well as this. I think most people, most experienced researchers know that methods, data, and analysis are always already messy processes, so that won't surprise you. Probably none of this surprises you as being messy, but it's fun to talk about it as messy. Maybe it's fun to talk about in terms of technology, what we expect to be clean and crisp and new and shiny. It's messy too. So, in terms of a messy topic, when I introduce that I do work on digital readability, especially coming from writing studies, most people assume that I'm talking about instructional interventions or reading interventions, strategies, how to either teach someone to read, which realistically is the work of my elementary school literacy educator brethren, or at the college level, it's more usually interventions to try to read more sophisticated work, read academic work, note-taking, stuff like that. That's not what this project is. This project is about readability in the sense of format readability. And so we all know that reading can be difficult, especially if the text is small. But size of text is not the only thing. We know font plays. I'm pretty confident a lot of us can talk about some of our favorite or fonts we really don't like reading in. Size, obviously, again, we know that matters, especially those of us who have found over the years that We increase the size on our computer screen or on our digital tablets or phones. But spacing really matters as well. And spacing, actually, there's lots of ways to talk about spacing: line height, character spacing. I do want to pause for 1 second here and quickly do both a shout out that these particular slides I completely stole from Rick, and he knew it because he knows it, I asked for it, on trying to describe readability. And I just want to say all images in this, unless otherwise cited, are from Adobe stock, licensed appropriately. Okay, so topic. The topic is complicated, especially again as a writing studies scholar, that people aren't what is expected. But this is my favorite quote so far from research participants, is the factor, that this participant was so surprised at how much spacing made a difference. And I think that's potentially surprising for a lot of us because we're so used to thinking in terms of font or size. But spacing really does matter. Okay, so the messy topic, digital readability. It's either personalized reading formats or individualized reading formats. Even that language, I know that's circular. Towards the beginning of this project, Rick, who you'll get to hear from a little later, actually invited me into this larger project in spring or early summer 2020. At the earlier point of this, we were referring to it as personalized reading formats. Now we've shifted as the larger group starting to use individualized as instead. So even kind of the topic and word choice, I feel like it's sometimes the same thing as someone 20 years of online or distance learning. Those mean different things too. So this messy, it's messy, this topic. But it's not only the topic, well, no. I do want to say though, why a moment of why this matters, because sometimes that's part of the messy. People are like, well, why does this matter? So I just want to give you the anecdote. Think about if you, or for those of you who are parents, one of your children, who has a high stakes test, and the results of that test matter a lot. And you don't have the ability to change the font, size, style, or spacing when taking that test. And if the research of the other side of the research team, who's doing more of the efficacy research, is right, and they're showing some pretty cool data that folks have individualized formats, and there is no one font type, size, spacing to rule them all. And there is not even one that is overall like 80% of the population. No, it's much more distributed than that. If that's the case, that means that for students in those high stakes situations, that before they're even engaging with the content, some are more likely to do better than others, just because whether or not they can or cannot switch the format. Now, the ability to switch it and switch it quickly is just as important. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot of actually a research paper on this topic from my mobile device in Adobe Acrobat Reader, which has this cool little technology called liquid mode, and you click the little liquid mode icon and it reflows and makes it much easier to read instantly, push of a button. And not only it still allows you to do a little bit more formatting. There's, a lot of our digital reading spaces now have some type of icon, sometimes looks like this a lot, to play with, in this case, play with spacing. So back to the ability to get from the first to the last quickly and easily is important in our ability to read now, especially in high stakes reading environments. Messy topic, but also what I'm getting at is messy angle. So a lot of times in the scholarship of teaching and learning, the emphasis of the scholarship is on achievement. Does this intervention help the students achieve whatever their learning is more effectively? That's not the angle of this research I'm interested in. Again, the larger group I'm a part of, and we'll talk about that being messy too, they're doing that research. What I'm interested in and what the angle of research I'm on is about engagement. What does it mean to adopt a personalized reading format and implement it? I mean, the quick way to think about that is we all know eating veggies are good for us. It doesn't mean we do it. And it doesn't even mean if we want to do it. Getting fresh veggies regularly, getting them, preparing them, that's a complex thing too, right? And so the Cues research project is very much focused on the adopting process and the experience of faculty who are working it into their classrooms, the experience with students who are, adopting digital reading environments and reading with their personalized or individualized reading format, and then how that impacts their the active reading and learning. Okay, so messy topic, messy angle. Let's talk about messy methods. Again, most people are used to messy methods. This particular project is messy in its individual way of, one, trying to get to the participants. So I need classes that are using digital reading materials. And even though we have data that shows a lot of classes, a lot of undergraduates are doing that, still need to know and find those. In this case, trying to go through the bookstore, I confess that's been tricky. We're all bad about adopting our books in time. But then, once I find out if a faculty is, I have to approach faculty and ask if they're willing to incorporate in this class. And folks are busy. Their classes are already full. To ask them to include an intervention in their class, that is also complicated. And then the student participants, just getting their buy-in to do this, because like preparing fresh vegetables, adopting and adapting takes time on top of their busy lives. And then the first iteration of this project. So CUES is actually my second internal funding for this. I applied for one of the 2020 research advancement grants. I have to look at this. I never remember the title. Accelerate for Success. It was awarded at the end of 2020, and First Collaborative Group and we collected data in 21. You hear the dates. The pandemic obviously greatly impacted this. I'm actually proud to say that increasingly I see students and faculty being more protective of their time, but it makes it difficult to get participants if they're protecting their time. But other complications for me as a scholar with this project, one, the intervention technology itself. I'm working with engineers who are designing this, and I'm dependent on their setup of the applications where folks go and get a sense of what is a better font, what is better spacing. So for example, right now, the spacing test, if you will, it's not in play. So the folks the students who are working right now on this study or participating are only working in terms of best font. And I'm dependent on the larger research team for that. Also research instruments. For me, this is the first time I've used a pre-vetted tool. That's not how I've generally worked, so the NASA Task Load Index. And that particular tool also is pushing me in terms of quantitative analysis. Historically, the quantitative analysis I've always done is just descriptive in nature, and this is definitely begging for more complex and sophisticated analysis. So I'm really glad that I'm part of a research team, a larger team. Now, a lot of, especially coming from the humanities, when I think of research team, I do traditionally think of the research lab, the science, in my mind, the science lab, because writing studies come from English. We have the lone scholar in the attic. That's how we're supposed to work. That's the image of now it might look more like this, which actually jives with me because, again, as a specialist of online teaching and learning, all the images representing online teaching and learning also look like this. So contemporary solo scholarship and online teaching and learning, right here, this image. But what in reality it looks like is, especially again, remember I said 2020 was invited 2020, Zoom, lots and lots of Zoom meetings. That is what this team looks like. Again, typical messy, but it is messy and, kind of embrace the chaos. I guess the thesis, if I'm going to get at, I will say here and then I will conclude again later, is that working messy research or trying to clean messy research is better with others. All of my scholarship, almost all of my scholarship is collaborative. And for years, I've talked about how it improves my scholarship, and that is part of this. In acknowledging the scholarship is messy and working with others helps clean it up a bit. So at this point, I just want to share the next two slides, and these are the slides that I always share when I'm presenting on this to show this this collaboration. So the University of Arizona team, who started with that research advancement grant, Accelerate for Success, but names have been added, like Bethany here and Sally, who's my current RA, as this project goes on. So when I talk about this, I'm showing like I'm an individual standing up here representing all of these people and their labor. But it's not just me and the University of Arizona. This project, what is some of the most exciting for me as a scholar is this project not only spans multiple institutions, and it's bigger than this, actually. Rick has a great slide later, but it spans working with nonprofits as well as companies like Adobe and Google. And that's, in terms of, you know, the long-term impact of this, that is exciting. But it's also exciting because you know, having a font specialist who works for Adobe to be able, you know, in meetings and talking about things, you learn a lot. I'm just gonna say, you learn a lot. And again, same picture. And what I love about this picture, I got it last minute, so I'm in there. But there's representation in this particular, just this image, 3 different nonprofits. And then in the upper right-hand corner, Zoya and Rick, who we'll get later, are from Adobe. So it's exciting to see that type of collaboration, but it's messy. It's messy. So at this point, I invited 2 students who have worked with me on this project so far, and will probably come back in various capacities and work on it, to reflect on it. So Anuj Gupta, who is a graduate student in the Rhetoric, Composition, and Teaching of English program in which I'm faculty, he's going to reflect on lessons from, he worked with on the initiate pilot implementation, that 2020 grant that collected data in 2021. So Anuj, I'm going to hand this over to you. Do you want to stay there or come up here? Okay. Power of the remote.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Yes, slides are working. I just want to kind of talk about 3 main lessons that I learned while implementing the pilot. And as Shelley foregrounded, this is not like my unique individual lessons. It's something that the whole team learned while working together. And the first thing is just kind of thinking about frameworks that we can use while understanding the impact of educational technologies. And as Shelley was talking about, usually we see studies that are usually just, you know, measuring one variable onto one other variable. You see like, okay, here's a cool affordance that a technology has. Let's try and see what impact it's having on students' memory retention or grades or engagement or things like that. That definitely gives us a slice of the picture, but if you have this kind of a messy, multi-dimensional understanding where you really want to study a whole 360-degree picture, what we realized was that you need to look at what's happening on multiple dimensions, not just the cognitive one. You need to think about what kind of emotions are in play, what's happening at the behavioral level, what are students' bodies feeling like, what's happening at the social level inside the classroom, what's happening at the larger environmental kind of contextual thing, what situations are students using these technologies in. And that gives you a complex picture, but also it makes things even more messy. So how do we operationalize this kind of ecological multidimensional framework? What we realized was that it really helps to have a mixed methods kind of multi-phase approach. And we've had various waves of this project almost. I'm part of the first wave, and Bethany here will talk about the current wave that's going on. And what we did was we used multiple instruments. Shelley spoke about a quantitative instrument that's really popular in UX research called the NASA Task Load Index, which kind of looks at how cognitively taxing is a particular task when you're performing it. So we use that, but we also augmented that with various other questions about the kind of emotional experiences that people were having. We were using a lot of constructs that come from like our specific discipline. So we were also interested in, let's say, the genre of the readings that students were looking at. We found really interesting things like it's difficult to adapt readings when you're coming from STEM backgrounds because you have lots of charts and diagrams, and the technology for adaptation currently doesn't adapt the fonts inside the chart. So that was an interesting finding that we could get only because we were looking at the genre as well. We also wanted to see what kind of impact is happening in real live natural settings and not inside lab settings. So the real messy thing about implementing things inside a classroom. We worked for lots of time. Okay, I'm going to be silent for a second, let the plane pass. This happens all the time when we are teaching. We have like a big Air Force Academy in Tucson, so planes are flying all the time. Yeah, so we decided that we'll study stuff happening inside the classroom. So we spent a lot of time building activities that teachers could directly plug and play into their courses, which would be about, hey, let's try this tool out, and now let's try to implement it. And all those kinds of packages were built up. Then we kind of had 3 different data collection methods, as I was talking about. One was the survey, which had both quantitative and qualitative elements. We also designed a diary study where we asked students to implement the technology thrice, and each time they would reflect on certain aspects of their experience. And eventually we also did focus groups with the teachers who use this tool for the students in the classroom to really get a complex 360-degree picture of what was going on. And then we have been analyzing that data using both qualitative methods. We've been coding it together as a team, and we've also been doing quantitative analysis, looking at descriptive statistics, looking at correlations and regressions and things like that. And the third and final kind of realization that we had is that if you truly want to implement or operationalize this kind of complex multi-methods research design, you definitely need a multidisciplinary team. We were really lucky that we had people from information science who were looking at the cognitive constructs, cognitive overload, things like that. Then many of us brought expertise from education, writing studies, applied linguistics. So we really knew what kind of constructs are important when students are reading and writing inside the classroom, what to think about. So all of that allowed us to create a complex picture. And finally, when you're working in such teams, I think my biggest takeaway was that so many tangential projects emerge. For example, we hadn't anticipated this, but we had to do quite an extensive lit review, right, for this study. So a slice of that became a separate annotated bibliography that one of my collaborators, Kevin, and I published separately, and we geared it towards teachers teaching first-year writing about how they can use digital reading exercises in their classrooms to optimize their students' experiences. I personally do a lot of research on emotions and specifically academic writing anxiety. So I kind of sneaked in a couple of questions in the survey that would elicit more emotion-focused data. And that led to very interesting insights. And we were able to have a spin-off presentation that Shelley, I, and another person on our team did on how this tool can potentially reduce reading anxiety for students. And there are lots of other projects like this. Like we were also studying the collaboration that large teams do, and we collected a lot of data on that. That's one of the projects that's kind of been filed in a cabinet somewhere, and we might pick up on that later on. But yeah, those are the 3 main things that if you want to study educational technologies, think about multiple dimensions, complex 360-degree things, operationalize that with multi-phase mixed methods approaches, and make sure you have a very diverse kind of multidisciplinary team which can help you design different aspects of that study. So that's me, and now we have Bethany.
Doesn't Anuj give all this great academic language to saying, make sure it's messy? So I am also inviting Bethany to reflect, and Bethany, you can either sit or stand. And I just want to say, one, we just want to quickly, Bethany is going to graduate in a couple more weeks. So yay, Bethany's almost done with her English major and psychology minor, yes. And she is accepted going to grad school. So all the good things for Bethany. Bethany worked with me this summer as an undergraduate researcher, and this summer was the kind of transition phase. I had been accepted into the CUES fellowship program, but hadn't quite, started the second phase, data collection, and the type of work Bethany was doing. She was in the nice transition phase of helping with more review of lit, especially emotional stuff, because we had found more emotional stuff in that first iteration, and then preparing for the work this year. So Bethany, please talk to us.
Hello, everyone. So I wanted to take a moment and reflect on kind of the importance of having a multidisciplinary team, as he was just talking about, especially in something like the digital humanities, which is kind of an interdisciplinary subject by its nature. So in terms of my personal background, I came out of this project being really interested in the implications that it could have on accessibility in the humanities. I know a lot of people with ADHD and with dyslexia who are very affected, very clearly affected by font, and that changes their ability to read and their relationship with reading. So that's kind of a perspective that I wanted to bring into the review of literature. And then in terms of our academic backgrounds, kind of the various people that were working. I came from a very reading-heavy major, and so that was kind of my strength to provide. But I also got to learn from some of the other students that were working. There was a fellow student researcher who was an engineering student and was really interested in the data analytics portion, the survey revisions. And I got to kind of work with her and learn very practical skills that I may not have otherwise, like working with Excel, writing and drafting effective survey questions. So in having kind of my own personal experiences brought in and also being able to learn from other students, it felt like personal experience was just a super enriching factor in the entire process, which of course can be very messy but can also make a team very strong. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically the work that I did in reading and writing. So that was really my strength coming in, and so I mostly focused on the review of literature and performing some secondary research. And all of that really seemed to require a kind of flexibility and willing to work within the messiness in a way that I hadn't really before. So overall, my piece of the team combed through 30 plus articles on emotions and embodiment in reading. And that's kind of where my experience in the humanities came into play. I was basically reading and synthesizing large amounts of information, as I usually do, and kind of trying to arrange the most relevant pieces into a more cohesive whole. Sorry. The allergies, okay. Yeah, so it kind of just required that I played with some new and unfamiliar ideas and was willing to figure out how they all work together to try to piece together my little chunk of the review of literature. That sort of like intellectual flexibility helped me kind of stretch my abilities in like some different ways, and I got to learn a lot from that, working with more qualitative and quantitative data as opposed to just literature as I'm usually working with. And then finally, I wanted to talk about my perspective while revising some of the early survey instruments. During our research, reading all of these articles on emotions and embodiment, it became very clear that reading is a super personal experience that's affected by a whole host of external factors. And because I work within a very reading-heavy discipline, I recognize that there's a huge difference between reading-related emotions in reading for work and reading for pleasure. And so kind of my piece in revising the survey instruments was thinking about distinguishing between reading for work, reading for school, reading for pleasure, and then also distinguishing between some of the emotions that are involved with that, like confidence versus comfortability, and you know, how people are able to engage with reading because of that. I felt that that part kind of was trying to give participants a wider vocabulary to express their experiences, like within, you know, a survey. So overall, I kind of found out during my experience in this research that personal experience really enriches the process itself of researching and is very relevant in the data itself in terms of people's relationships with reading.
Thank you, Bethany. And I just want to say exactly what I feel like both of them have contributed to this, is just the importance of what people bring to projects, what they learn and do while in the projects, and we all grow from working together. However, this is also supposed to be a research talk, and so I'm sure some of you are just like, Shelley, can you share some data with us? So I'm going to share some messy data with you, and it's messy because it's fresh. And when I say fresh, it's Sunday fresh, as in last Sunday. I mean, still collecting it, so this is a snapshot. So keep that in mind. Please don't take this as the end-all, be-all. But it's got some exciting stuff, and especially, even though I'm not sharing data with you from what we collected in 2021, I will be making some connections. So one of the things that became very evident with the data from 2021 is the success is very dependent upon the difficulty of setting up personalized or individualized reading formats in the digital environment. So what you're seeing on this slide is students using the NASA Task Load Index or participants to talk about the ease or difficulty of both setting up and then doing the reading. And I'm going to go across the top two rows. So the first question is, how successful was the setup? NASA Task Load Index uses a scale of 1 to 21. In terms of success, something being successful would be a high score. What you're seeing there with the median is, 16 over 15. Great, excited about that. But what I'm really excited about is that mode. So, mean, median, mode, different ways of getting at the middle. Mode being, this is the most common answer, was 21. So most of the participants not only said, yeah, we got it, but 21, we got it, thumbs up. Similarly, the next row, how hard it was setting up. So again, this is gauging difficulty, so a low score is good. We don't want it to be difficult. Under 5, yay, great. But again, that mode 1, most of them are saying, this was a piece of cake to set up. Fabulous, this is fabulous to go through. Now, you see the data there with the success of the reading and how difficult the reading, and that's much more nuanced and complex, as it should be, because it's reading. And all the variables that both Anuj and Bethany talked about impact those types of self-reflection. A little bit more data, we asked questions on, this is kind of that reflective, quantitative diary, if you will. In doing the reading with personalized reading format, did it make reading ... easy, enjoyable, efficient, or meaningful? Again, scale of 1 to 5. Happy to see all of them are over 3. Easy, efficient, and meaningful, so that's the blue, yellow, and green. Their mode and medium were all 4. Now the lowest one here on average, mode, and medium, all close to that 3 mark, enjoyable. But I think this is one of those marks where we have to acknowledge that the format alone is not going to make necessarily complex academic reading or reading in the class that you might not be excited about enjoyable. There are very many factors there, right? I will confess, though, this qualitative, and this is the messiest of all. Remember I said pulled it Sunday? I'm the only one who's looked at it. So what you're seeing here is, I'm not even calling this coded. I'm just going to share with you, these are trends, and I say trends meaning more than one participant, actually more than 2. So at least 3 people mentioned something like this. So here are messages we were seeing. 1, they were just surprised at the positive impact. Yay, good. I was really excited by the ones who were distinguishing between the impact on format and content. So that complexity, they were starting to understand the complexity that format is not going to solve all of their reading woes. If they're not interested in this, or it's a complex reading or something like that, it's still, the content matters. Eye strain, so this is when Anuj mentioned the physical, they're aware of the physical. And so a lot of them talked about, oh, it's making it easier on my eyes are not straining as much. Speed, efficiency, that, I'm reading faster. Emotional language, so that, we seeing terms like calm, less boring, enjoyed. And then there was a few who were like, I didn't really notice a difference. And that's okay too. That's real, that's what happens in research, right? But to me, the most exciting part about this is, one messy we realized in the first iteration with Anuj and that large group was we accidentally, in the open-ended question, we asked the closed questions first, which the language then informed what words they used in the open-ended question. So many changes, but one change was in this, we kind of asked that diary question first, just going like, hey, tell us about your experience. And the survey didn't show the next page. Then they got the list of questions. And so what's really exciting about this is that what I'm saying trends right now, do align really well with the codes that we came up with that initial data. So that's exciting, right? I mean, that's exciting to have. So yay, some messy middle data. I feel like the piece about being ed tech, what I'm interested in as a scholar, like I said, all of my data, all of my, sorry, I'll get this. Not only is almost all of my scholarship collaborative, almost all of my scholarship, if you look at my CV, whatever I present or publish on, if you go back in time, I was doing that thing. So I'm very interested in research that's going to improve. A lot of my early ed tech research was improving and supporting people, especially teachers. So doing usability testing in online classes, research on designing and assessing multimedia assignments, and that's stuff that could go back and give to teachers or instructional designers. But the past couple years, I've been really excited to work with particular technologies and working closer with the companies to actually maybe impact the technology itself. So you may not recognize technologies like Eli Review or Power Notes. Eli Review is a peer review technology. Power Notes is a digital annotation and synthesis technology. And what research on those, and I'm going to give a shout out to Kayla who worked on those projects with me, both of them. Exciting about research on those is not only, were we able to do stuff and make an impact here, were we able to do stuff and present and publish, but because we worked closely with the companies, we're also able to give data and suggestions back to the companies. Now, those you might not recognize, might not use. Adobe Acrobat Reader, I'm fairly confident PDFs are probably a staple of as you as teachers and researchers. And so you heard some of this data about digital readability. Obviously the desire to try to impact how these reading technologies that matters. It doesn't matter if we know this works. If we're not working with the big companies that are going to help make change to make it easier for students and faculty, it's not going to help long term. So to me, what I want to thank Rick as my introduction to him. Rick, and I'm going to also, hold on, I'm going to try to get Rick over, there we go. Hey, we have your image, Rick. That's what I'm, what can I do? Will that make it bigger? Yeah. Okay, I think it's going to keep the slides. Rick is an entrepreneur in residence at Adobe, and he works specifically, other projects too, but with Acrobat on that team. And asking Rick to present in this panel with me, I asked him to specifically reflect on what does it mean and how messy is it to work with academics on research. And I'm gonna, hold on Rick, I'm trying to get the image so we can see you and the slides. So Rick, do you wanna, let's see if we hear you.
Hi Shelley.
Yes, we hear you, Rick.
I'm coming through.
Yes.
Thanks for inviting me. I wish I could have been there in person. I just couldn't make the airline tickets line up. But happy to be here on Zoom at any rate. And Shelley, I really want to thank you for all the work that you've done with us for the last 3-4 years. I've known Shelley even longer than that because Shelley's one of Adobe's valued education leaders. And we rely on people like Shelley to bring news of the real world, particularly the academic world, back to Adobe so that we know we're building the right things. This project that Shelley's been part of is pretty darn big. It started back in 2017 when Readability Matters, you see their logo up there on board, knocked on our door and presented some really interesting research. And I think that Kathy Crowley, who's one of the founders of Readability Matters, is on the line with us too. They showed us some research that showed that individual differences in type and font can make a huge difference in helping people to read their very best. And we took that very seriously and really dove into it to do the research to figure out how to include it in product and how to make it easy for people to get to. And that's where Shelley and a lot of other academics and researchers have been helping us. In addition to Readability Matters, we partnered very closely with the University of Central Florida, where we basically created what we call the Virtual Readability Lab. And we have been undertaking studies and pilot programs in a wide variety of areas, and I'm going to take you through a few of those now. Shelley, do you want to change the slide? We have a lot of published research. These are the first 3 pieces. I haven't updated my slides in a while, but we've got quite a bit of published research out on the efficacy of font and other reading choices in Bethany. I'm going to be quoting you in about 45 minutes to a VP I'm meeting with. We want people to realize that we need to take into account individual differences, and dyslexia and ADHD are 2 of those compounding factors that we really need to cater to in order to make reading available to them as well as the rest of the population. If you want to change to the next one. And then Shelley showed a slide a few minutes ago of 3 nonprofits. One of the nonprofits there was an organization called World Education. And World Education is dedicated to educating underserved adult populations. So the kind of student that doesn't show up on your campus, but the kind of student who may be a recent immigrant who's just trying to learn enough to get a job to support their family. And so we've been working in a number of pilot programs with them, because these students typically don't have laptops. They only have smartphones, and a lot of their reading materials are PDFs. And Shelley talked a minute ago about how reading a PDF on a smartphone can be a pretty crummy experience, and we know that. Shelley, if you want to move to the next slide. And so here's an example of one of the pilot programs we're in. In the state of Maryland, this is a program for newly arrived immigrants. Many of them want to earn a truck driving license, so they want to take the commercial truck driving exam. And in fact, they go to class to learn English and reading. And this is the primer, if you will. This is the reading material they use to read on, and it's the driver's license manual. If they open it up on their phones, again, which is their only device they've got available to them, next slide, this is what they see. Nobody's going to learn to read or learn how to drive a truck if this is the text that they need to navigate. And so our liquid mode, next slide, can reflow that, and then the reading controls that we put into that can customize it. We're doing the same thing with nurse assistant programs in Minneapolis, which gets us into healthcare. And then the next one, this is let's see, I kind of trying to see what you got up for a slide.
Sorry,
the reason that we showed, if you want to back up one,
Yep.
The New York Times talked about the prevalence of HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a story in the Times Magazine in February of this year. We're actually working with World Education in a program to work on this problem through reading, believe it or not. So now if you can move to the next slide. Let me see, I'm having a little trouble, Shelley, figuring out
I'm sorry,
reading
Rick.
this. But that's okay, I've got mine, I know what we have up there. So in this case, we're working with 1,200 caseworkers in Malawi. They're deployed out into the bush to work with HIV positive families to teach them how to use retroviral drugs, to keep the children safe if one of the adults has already been infected, and basically to keep the family healthy and keep the family thriving. They have what we call job aids, which is really a little healthcare handbook that is distributed today on paper, but in sub-Saharan Africa, paper doesn't work very well. In the first place, it's such a poor country. I think Malawi is one of the poorest countries on the continent, that just to print these job aids requires that the government go to UNESCO and ask for a grant to cover the printing costs. So just printing a piece of paper is a problem, and once the paper is printed, it's probably out of date, and they can't afford to update it. It gets soggy in the environment, it gets moldy, it gets torn. And so what we've done is the USAID footed the bill for 1,200 Android phones for each of these people, and we are fitting those phones out with PDFs and doing a lot of research around the use of these phones, these PDFs, and the use of liquid mode and reading controls to make all this healthcare information available to the workers. You can go to the next one. Hold on. Let me see what we got here. This is the job aid, and if you go to the next page, so if they brought it up, if they bring that job aid up on their phones, this should look very familiar, like the slide that Shelley showed a few minutes ago. That first panel is what they're stuck with if they try to read it without our customization software. The next panel shows what happens when you're in liquid mode, and then the final panel shows that we're actually working not only in English, these job aids come in English and in the local language, Chichewa. So we're able to affect the reading performance in both languages, and the workers can choose which one they want to use. Moving on. So this gets us to the overall movement here. This is a big effort, and Adobe is not in it alone. Because Readability Matters brought this to our attention, we've put a lot of time and money and programming, engineering into it, but we know that we can't do it alone, that the ability for individuals to customize their reading experience needs to be universal. So in order to do that, we've created what we call the Readability Consortium. Next slide. The consortium is dedicated to doing research. This is a really big piece of research that we did. Shelley is one of 28 authors, I think, we have on this document. It is being printed, it was just recently printed in Foundations and Trends of Human Interaction. This is a call for new ways of doing research into reading now that we have crowdsourcing available, now that we have digital reading materials available, and now that we can affect reading on an individual level. We need to really start researching it in many different ways. And Shelley is a part of this, along with a lot of other people. Next slide. In fact, this is what our consortium has grown to, is over 100 different members, including Google. At the top you have the founding members and the people who are funding the effort. I keep stressing that Adobe is not in this alone. We have a number of universities, and you should see your logo there in the second tier because of the work that Shelley's been doing and her colleagues. We've got research partners really across the board, and I won't go through this whole pyramid. But I will just stop to say that this is open to all. So if you are a researcher, if you are interested in using our tools, we are open sourcing all of our research tools. We're open sourcing our reading passages, and we hope to be able to create a big data set that researchers will be able to pull from in the very near future. We'd love to have you be part of us, and you can get to us through Shelley. Finally, let's go to the next one. I'm trying to keep up with you here.
Is that one?
I think I talked about, so I think I covered these 4 bullet points. Just with let me just underscore the invitation for any of you who are interested to join our community. What our goal is, and now we can go to the next slide. What our goal is to really enable everybody to read in their own reading format across any digital device that they pick up, not just PDFs and Adobe Reader. Next slide. And so the idea is you take some kind of test. We think that this is probably driven by AI, and since it's so trendy, maybe ChatGPT has something to do with it. And and we figure out, we pick up the cues one way or another, and we're making some pretty good progress on this, in how you read and what the best digital reading glasses, if you will, are for you. We think that we can tokenize that and then take that token and spread it across every device that you use. This is our long-range sort of goal, but to do that, we're going to have everybody play along with us, and that's why this is a consortium. That's why it's an open source movement, and I invite anybody here today to join us. I think that's all I've got.
Yeah.
So just reminding you, these are the people who started it, and we're happy to have anybody else join us.
Thank you, Rick. And I'm always reminded when Rick does that is that I'm, one small speck in a very large, complex, messy ecosystem of digital readability research. I'll end, because we want to try to leave a few minutes for questions, with my reflection that messy works. One of my favorite things I like to tell graduate students and undergraduate students who are going to do research, that one of the most liberating things as a researcher is when you publish your first empirical piece, because it presents this polished thing, especially methods. But it was a disaster area. It was messy. And that's the case all the time. I mean, it's this polished green curtain, but behind the curtain, there was a lot of mess there. And what I'm really excited that this work alone, I've worked with multiple internal UA funding as part of the focus on this presentation. The Research Advancement Grants Accelerate for Success required cross-disciplinary, cross-college researching. The Undergraduate Research Partnership Faculty, which allowed me to pay Bethany to work with me as an undergraduate researcher, again, required working with others. And CUES, even though I'm an individual CUES fellow, we have the FELC, and I want to thank my fellows and mentors for helping me continue to fine-tune this research. So all that to say is that research is messy works, and to stay with the green theme, and if you're a 70s science fiction fan, messy works because of the people. And I will leave it at that. We have a few minutes. Sorry, Wada, we went over.
Okay. Let's thank So if you have questions in Zoom, you can share them in the chat and we can probably read them from there. If you have questions here, go ahead and raise your hand and tell us, and I'll bring the mic to you. And I think I just want to say that this highlights the beauty of where the project sits in connection to impact, in connection to collaboration, in connection to the larger community, and I love, I think that's an important thing for us academics and other people to see. So thank you everyone, Rick and all of you. Okay.
Thank you. So I do have a question on the multi-rater coding situation, because actually I'm doing it and it's really complex. It's so messy. So I'm really curious how you guys set up navigating the whole multi-rater coding situation.
Do you want to take that? Sure.
That's a fantastic question. What we did was, and here Shelley's expertise in having done that for several decades now, I guess, comes in, where we anonymized the data and we split it up into 3 Excel sheets. We went really old school, and Excel is old school now. But Shelley had one, I had one, and I believe An had one. This is one of the versions of the coding. And each of us independently coded the data for whatever codes were naturally coming to us. And the 3 of us then sat down and had a discussion to figure out what works best for us for each of those things. And then we went back to the data and kind of recoded it. And the thing we went for was more contextual agreement between the 3 coders rather than inter-rater reliability at this stage, given the complex messiness of everything that we were dealing with. But there were also other codings that happened by other team members. I think Jack and Catherine and others had also done something. But yeah, that's what we essentially went with.
And I'll just say for that first batch, part of it, remember I said pandemic, so the number of participants was small enough that we could code in that way. I'm imagining with the cues-funded research, that we will need to get to a point where we're creating code books like we did, creating code books and then testing with coders and starting to think in terms of the inter-rater reliability, because the number of responses is going to be much larger. Yeah.
Just one final thing on that front. Recently, I've started to experiment with using data science for qualitative coding. So I'm also experimenting with like using Python and topic modeling to do a first round of initial coding. And I'm happy to talk about that separately if you're interested in those methods.
I'm down for that.
Okay.
Thank you. We have another question here, and then we'll check on Zoom.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm John from the Honors College and Office of General Education, and I have a question regarding the demographics of the people who are participating. Particularly here, because we're in Arizona, we are in the borderlands, and besides speaking English, we have speaking and reading in English, we have speaking Spanish and other languages. So additional languages and Native American communities here. So I'm wondering about how it would be the correlation between the readability and the additional language speakers, or readers in this case. Just because, yes, as bilingual myself, multilingual myself, I find difficult sometimes, besides of the dyslexia, besides of the format, besides of many other things, the limitation within the vocabulary, with the limitation within the order of the genre of the article, and also how this is going to be affected by ChatGPT in correlation with the technologies involved.
I'm going to just pop that out. So yeah, so I'm going to do this. Great questions. I was going to say ChatGPT and AI, I think this is going to be radically, and I think Rick's slide showing that it's going to be both in the testing side of it as well as the token and trying to get it distributed. That's their impact there. But in terms of this particular research, this iteration, and so the surveys that Bethany helped with, we have a whole suite of questions that are asking about students to self-report on what is their, if English is their primary, what is their preferred reading language, and so we are planning on doing analysis that does account for that. Just you're not seeing it yet. Yes.
Thank you for that. Are there questions in chat? I can't see the chat. Can you see
yes.
the chat?
No, I can't see the chat, but I'll come.
Yeah, or just...
We'll cheat this way. Okay. Yeah. The question. What questions are starting to emerge for this work that you would like to pursue in future work or see others pursue, both here at University of Arizona and more broadly? Thank you, Susan. Great question. To me, again, it's my angle, so I'm going to answer it, but then I'm going to pass it down the panel, and I bet Rick will also have an answer for this. The adoption, the ease of adoption, that for me is the big hurdle right now. And so I'm really interested in what technologies are being required for students to be working in, and what is the ability for them to read. And so when I've done a presentation with this that had a room full of secondary educators, this was heartbreaking to listen to them, because they're like, we have no control over that. We have no, testing environments we know are the highest stakes and zero adaptability there. So I think what that gets to is the politics of this. And that's part of what Rick and the consortium is doing, is starting to do the political work. That if this really does impact reading in the way that the research is showing, then there are some really high stake things that we need to try to get changed. I hope that answers some of that. Do any of you want to? Bethany? Yeah.
Just a little thing. I'm of course interested in incorporating disability studies into this kind of thing and figuring out what the impact of these sorts of technologies could have. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No.
So as I said, one of the new questions that emerged for me was the emotional side of things, about how it's reducing reading anxiety, writing anxiety. And to pick up on an earlier question about second language learners, I have interest in that too, as I am also a multilingual student, an international student. And like a hypothesis that I think is very interesting to explore in writing research, what we've seen is that if you reduce grammar and proofreading requirements from second language learners, they're able to focus on more global rhetorical outcomes better. Think about argumentation if you remove grammar as a thing that they're concerned about. So maybe a good hypothesis to explore is if you do that with reading. If you make it easier to read, if you reduce the cognitive load required to look at the font and things like that, maybe their overall rhetorical reading experience also improves. That would be interesting to explore.
And I know we're over time, but Rick, did you have something you wanted to add to that next steps research?
Big question. I think the big question for us that's driving everything, we know that it makes a difference. We've proved that. We've spent the last 4 years proving it, and Readability Matters has 15 years of research before that that proves it. The really hard thing is to figure out how to make that really easy for people to get a hold of. And so I said this to somebody this morning. I said, well, the science fiction answer, but now with ChatGPT, we're kind of living in science fiction, I feel. The kind of science fiction answer is, imagine that you looked at a page and it could intuit how you are reading, and it could rearrange itself as you were trying to read. And make it as easy as possible for you to read. So it's almost these self-adjusting glasses that would make any document as easy as possible to read. Our research is going there, but there are a lot of different pieces to that, and all the help we can get, we will welcome.
Thank you for that. We have one more question. We're going to take this question and then we're going to formally close out. If you do have to go, please do so. We're at time.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you for this. One question, I know you mentioned that you've been having trouble getting into places, so what can those here in the audience, what can we do, those through Zoom, to help you disseminate this and get in contact with who you need to be?
That's great. Like I said, I was hopefully trying to go through the bookstore, and like I said, one, those folks are busy, acknowledge that, and two, a lot of us as instructors are terrible about getting our textbook orders in a timely manner. So yes, I mean, in the same way Rick made a call, this is potentially me making a call. If you are using digital text, requiring primarily digital text, so right now the bookstore, most of the digital books are either in VitalSource, or through the bookstore they're in VitalSource, and the research, the data you just saw today is on that. But I know we are also using OER, and I'm blanking on the application that Gen Ed is using right now. Do you remember what it's called? Exactly. So we're both blanking on it. But the institution also is doing that, and then PDFs as well, obviously, and that has its own. And happy to talk about that. That has its own complications depending on where the students are reading, and but those are all things. So basically, yes, if you are a faculty member, or you have faculty members in your program, that pretty much all the reading is digital. Please come talk to me.
Well, thank you, everyone. If you're in Zoom and you're on campus, feel free to come and get some goodies. There's lots left here in the room. I'd like to close thanking our panel. Rick, are you in Boston? Yes, nearby there. And everybody here, thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk, and we will leave you here with a slide about an upcoming workshop on cues. You can look at it there. You can find more information. Let's thank our audience again.